Hi everyone, I'm Peng, and today I will be introducing pointers in the C syntax. And to do this, I'm going to use a function called goNextDay, which takes in a single parameter, day, and increments it. In this example, uh, we are doing what a beginner might do to try and get this working. They might declare a global variable here called day, and call the goNextDay function with this variable and print out the value of the day variable. They might be disappointed though, because instead of incrementing day, they don't. Now this hurdle is a beginner mistake, and it doesn't take too long to move past it. I'm not going to explain too much here. All we're doing here is returning the value of day and then setting it to the value of our global variable and printing it out, and we get exactly what we want. But what if we have more than one variable? We can only return one of them in an integer type. And so instead of incrementing both day and day two, we only increment day. So finally, what is the solution? The solution is to set a global variable called days to an array, which is also called a pointer. An array is a pointer. A pointer is not necessarily an array. A bit like how squares are rectangles and rectangles might be squares. So what are we doing with this array? We're putting it into goNextDay as a parameter, and we're incrementing the value stored in the array. And it works. Now, what is a bit confusing here is why this works. We're not returning anything, but we're still able to update the values stored in this global variable. To understand why, we first have to understand why the first approach doesn't work. So in the first approach, we have a single global variable day, which we put into the goNextDay function. And then we increment the value of this variable day. But how C works and how a lot of other languages work is that it copies the value of the global variable, making a new variable that you then increment. So therefore, the original global variable, here day, is not affected. And so when you print out the value of the original global variable, it is also not affected. In this case, where we're using an array, what we're doing is we're putting the array into the goNextDay function, right? But what are we actually putting into the function? Are we putting in both these values? Like, it's not exactly clear. What we're putting into this function is an address where these two values are stored. So if we go to the address of where the 0 is stored, we get the value there, we update that, then we will see that our variable actually gets updated when we print it out. To go into a bit more depth, because that is confusing, is what we're doing is, well, we're putting in an address here into goNextDay, which is copied, right? So this variable here, days, it's not the same as this variable days. It is a copy of the variable, but that is not relevant because we're literally going to where the 0 and the 1 are stored and we're updating it there. And if you want to understand a bit more about how this works, well, this days with the square bracket in 0 is the address of the first element. And since these two elements, 0 and 1, are stored next to each other in memory, all we have to do when we put in our square bracket 1, or all the compiler has to do, is increment a certain offset to the address, and then using that and also the size of each element in our array, right, which is the size of an integer, by adding that offset, we're able to move to the second element here, 1, and we're able to get its value and update it as well.